Hey guys, this will be video 3 for the vintage White Falcon build, and I'm going to cover a few points primarily just related to the neck, and then I might discuss the body a little bit, but if I do so, it'll just be very general and more so as to how the body is going to relate to the neck join and how and the actual scale that we elect to go with in the build or that I like to put on the guitar because I'm kind of torn between the 24.562-inch scale, which is the very short scale. That's what's on this guitar. And this Penguin that I built has a 25-inch scale. And then the White Falcon and the Country Club, they have a 25.5-inch scale. Now, a 25.5-inch scale, that's a pretty big scale on a big guitar. So you're going to end up with a lot of girth and a lot of length. So, you're able to, design it however you want. I mean, this guitar right here, it could be sprayed white and put the sparkle binding on it and call it a White Falcon, even though it's not, it's not. So anyway, we'll cover that stuff later on, but I need to make a quick correction. I had mentioned that they introduced this pickup in '58. That's incorrect. They introduced the PAF Filtertron in '57. And it threw me a curveball because I was basing everything on, well, my 6120 Chet Atkins that was the cherry red, and it was an authentic '57. It had the Dynasonics in it. So I was making the assumption, well, then that means that they didn't have the Filtertron until '58. But in steps some photos that I tripped up on last night when I was researching the '57 White Falcon. Sure enough, I found an authentic '57 White Falcon with hump top inlays with Filtertrons. And then I thought, oh, that's some sort of hybrid. But I came to the realization that, oh my gosh, they introduced the Filtertron in the White Falcon and the Country Club, possibly. I don't know about the Country Club, but they introduced this pickup at 1 year earlier in the Falcon than they did the 6120. And I think the White Falcon was called the 6136. It's not that it's irrelevant, but do your research if you want to find out about that stuff. But nonetheless, what does that present me with? Well, if I want to, this White Falcon that I build, I can actually build it per '57 specs. And if I want to go with the hump top inlays and the Filtertrons, then I'm not deviating from anything original. I'm not trying to build a fake. I'm not trying to build a copy. I'm building a replica, but it's just it will have my own headstock logo on it, all that jazz. So nonetheless, but I do want to try to keep it as pure as possible, even down to the point of I'll be working with a Gabon ebony. And if I find out that the '57 White Falcon had Brazilian rosewood, then that might cause me to just. And then in '58, maybe they introduced the ebony and the neoclassical. Then, since I'm putting an ebony fret, and I'm definitely going to be putting this ebony fretboard on this guitar, if that be the case, even if I want the hump top inlays, I may default to the thumbprint neoclassical or neoclassic, whatever they call it. I think it's called neoclassical inlay. This design right here, if that makes sense. So anyway, in other words, I'm not there yet. I'm still kind of designing it as I go. And the two guys that commented, I really appreciate the information that you gave me as well because, and I'm digressing briefly here. They had mentioned that what the I found the little packet with the three brass switch tip or three gold switch tips. One was for the three-way. One was for the tone circuit, which some people call the mud switch, and then there was a third one. I was thinking, well, what's that? And they said it was a kill switch, and I never knew that. I'm serious. Out of all my research, I never tripped up on the fact there was a kill switch down there. And what's so funny? This is not me digressing because I'm not kidding you. When I was putting this guitar back together, I had considered putting a kill switch right there, and then having the three-way right there, and then drilling this configuration down here. to have the master tone, the bridge volume, and then go ahead and add the neck volume like the traditional guitar. But but again, if I did that, then I'm creating a hybrid guitar. So with this guitar, I'm going to leave it like that with the master tone because that is a CTS, and I may machine that down to just receive a switch tip, but nonetheless, visually, you'll never know that there's in other words, I'm not going to be putting a knob of any sort up there. All right, so let me stop talking about that because I'm going off the rails. But if anything, that's kind of cool, and I appreciate you guys responding because it helps keep my ego in check and keeps me on point. So, uh, back to rockabilly. Where I got cut off in the last video, and until I can get a new phone, I think that's gonna just happen. I'm gonna get cut off around 18 to 22 mark. What I was talking about is if you have a neck that especially maple, because once you start adding these ears, it's very, very difficult to get everything to match up really well. It can be done, but it takes a lot of time, and you've got to select the ear out of where you roughed out the neck. And I won't go into that. But if you're building a neck that's maple, and let's say it was going to be a visual neck, you could do what's called a stinger. In other words, you could actually veneer after you do all your work. Then you glue the veneer over it. This is exactly how I learned from Benedetto. He just let the veneer run long, and he glued it down with a tight bond. Why? Because you're able to get an incredible clamping force, very evenly distributed. No sense in using epoxy, even though that guitar, I do have the veneer on the top epoxy down because I wanted a little bit more tonal connection. But the tight bond was fine. And then you come in and you sand all that off, and then you can paint a stinger, or you paint the whole thing. Because if you clear coat it, you'll clearly see that it's got some veneer up there. But if you paint that stinger, it's a real cool way of defining, you know, that transition from the maple into the headstock, and it be covered. And then you see the stain right here. And I need to stop talking about this because I'm getting too technical. But nonetheless, that was a stinger that I had designed for the Flying V because I was trying when I cut these off and started reworking the headstock. I was trying to cover it, but nonetheless, it was paint grade anyway. So that's what I was talking about. You can do a stinger, and I don't recall Gretsch ever doing stingers intentionally. Uh, it's typically something that is to cover a repair. Like if a guitar got a headstock broken really bad and they had to do the repair, well, then that stinger is a real cool way of covering up the repair. Okay. All right. So let me back up and make certain. All right, I'm just going to check my list here because I talked about the PAF Filtertron coming out in '57 and how that lends the opportunity to use the hump top inlay, but probably not since I'll use the ebony. I'll probably will be going more along the 1958 um, um, model appointments with the neoclassic and the ebony. And I talked about the Stinger. Um, Let me just check off my notes very quickly because what I want to do is make sure I stay on point and cover these things so that we can put the headstock behind us, so that we can kind of put the general conversation about the neck even behind us. So, on that note, as I say too often, um, what I meant in the last video, at the end of the video when I was talking about the headstock, you got to get the headstock correct because if not, man, it's going to haunt you. It's just going to haunt you, and I won't go there because that penguin haunts me. Everything about the penguin is great except the bridge is about a 16th of an inch too high, and this headstock is about probably 3/8 of an inch too short. It's too squatty. It's too short this way. The headstock on that penguin, the actual, well, let me just pull it up here and show you. Okay, you see the nut location on this drawing? On that penguin over there, the nut is right there. It's ridiculous. The top of the nut is right there. So I got it just way too squatty. And it's so frustrating because, man, if I had have just gone another eighth of an inch, it would have given it a little bit longer neck. Now, is that too tall? It may be. So that's what I meant by you'll end up 1/16 inch of an on either the top or the bottom, and it'll be wrong. It's so frustrating. You got to find that sweet a point where it just really visually is balanced. Now, is that overkill? Yeah, for the most part it is, but if you build your project with the precision mindset and you're just overthinking everything, it will very likely um, keep you from making a mistake where you just kind of haphazardly just went through the project and said, it kind of looks like this, it looks like that. Because if you don't get really close, it will clearly prove that, it's not even a complementary design. And reeling myself back in, what I meant was, if you've never done this, and what I should have done when I built the penguin, I should have just made a tracing of what is already out there. Not that I'm trying to copy that, but it sure would have been nice to have seen what the big boys had already processed through, um, and had already determined, looked good, and not just looked good, but you have to keep in mind we're working within parameters that are very much defined by mechanical needs. The location of these tuners are not design specific. They're very much functional, because if you start pitching these strings too much, well, then you're going to get bind at the nut. And Paul Reed Smith was probably one of the first guys that we know of that started really producing a guitar that was fairly well thought out, where he brought the strings in because he kind of turned the headstock in reverse, and he got the was that the E, A, D, and the G closer together. We all know that the string path was less likely to bind. This monster right here, it's so wide, uh, and running a Bigsby, man, if you don't have that nut cut properly, your tuning instability is primarily gonna take place right here. It's not gonna be from these tuners slipping or the string slipping. And I need to reel myself back in because I'm getting way too technical. Why? Because I love the technical aspects of what it is that I'm doing or what we're doing here. But nonetheless, just keep that in mind, that if you're doing something new, just maybe find out what these dimensions are, and just I'm not. Let me see if I can drive this home. And I should have made a little model to define. So just bear with me while I do this cowboy thing. That's all I'm talking about right there. Cover that up, cover that up, cover that up if you want to, but just know that the width of your nut is going to define the compound radius curve right here. And whether you flare out over to here or in a little bit, it will affect the location of that because it has to be able to reach. But nonetheless, all I'm saying, those points right there are pretty much standardized. And what the mistake I made with my penguin, I tried to design my own layout based on a target string path. And I was trying to optimize the string path, but when you get this tightened up, well, then it changes the outer design entirely. And so, anyway, neither here nor there, but it's a long drawn out conversation. But it's so critical that you get those points right, because from a visual standpoint, second to functionality standpoint first. All right, so let me get my table cleaned up here a little bit. And then I think I drove that home enough to realize that, did I trace this because I want to copy this? No, I wanted to trace this so that I could correct the mistakes. This distance, the center line distance from here to here, is simply too wide. It's just too much. But if you start changing it, well, then you lose the actual profile of that guitar. So you got to walk that fine line of finding out what is functional and what is aesthetically pleasing. And you know who pretty much hit the nail on the head. I mean, this is about as perfect as you can get right here. And this is the more modern one, where they're a little bit wider. I'll stop talking about that. Let me check the time. 15 minutes of headstock rambling. Let me get speaking of headstock, let me just get that off the counter. And then one thing I will mention, I think what's going to happen is this headstock is very, very close to where I want to be. But the mistake I had made, yeah, I was just a little bit too round, too soft right here. I think what needs to happen is I need to flatten up a little bit and have let me put this on the paper. Well, we'll just look at this one in hand. Just imagine this drawing right here, but not quite as wide from here to here, because the radius that I have right here is a sharp little turn, and it gets real nice and flat. I was always tempted to continue with that compound radius, but once it hits that point right there, she's arrow straight, and that I think that's what really defines, what, the Penguin and the Falcon. But even still, I could probably drop that centerline point down ever so slightly more, and still kind of accentuate the fact of what the design really meant. And because my name is Mark, my obviously having the M is my first, the initial for my first name, or my name. That's why I came up with the MOA, because my last name starts with an O, and then my middle name starts with an A. So that's why I had come up with the MOA, and that was the original name that I was kind of calling my guitar builds was MOA, and it kind of had that Alvarez thing going where the A came up. Well, I should just show it here, where the A came up in the O, and it looked okay. But what the mistake I made on that Penguin is I didn't have the M sharp enough, and it got too flat. And it was funny. This one guy up in Nashville, he looked at it and he said, "Is that an owl?" And I was like, "Oh man!" When he and he didn't mean anything by it, but when he said that, it literally just killed it killed the whole design idea. And I don't think I ever put it on a guitar headstock after that. So let me check the time again, and then consider whether or not I'm going to just erase this video or do it again, or just leave it up. But I think, speaking of that, I probably will just let me pause. I'm going to clean off the table, and then I'm going to transition into talking about scale a little bit and how the scale is going to affect the actual design of the guitar. So let me pause. Okay, I think I'm going to start the video up just basically to end it because once I start talking about this, I know exactly what's going to happen. It's going to be just uh, an enormous amount of time devoted, or either I'll get in a hurry. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to introduce what I'm going to talk about in the next video, and I'm going to start talking about how you can lay out for getting ready to rough out all the material for your necks, and how you will. And I'm just going to stop talking, because if I don't stop talking, I'll start trying to explain it in 3 seconds. So let me end the video right there. Just pay a lot of attention to your headstock. And if anything, just start from an original design, like start with the Gibson, and then just modify it. Modify it enough that you're not encroaching or infringing on anything. And then you'll be surprised that there are still some original ideas left. I don't really think anyone could say anything from a corporate standpoint about this curvature here and this curvature here. But what goes on up here is where it really changes. That's where it becomes a legal issue, is where I'm going with this. Whether it be Gretsch, Gibson, you name it, Fender, they all have the right to protect their original designs, and I get that. So nonetheless, but because of the mechanical layout and the function of the actual guitar, None of these guys here in the States can claim that they were the ones that were the original designers of the guitar. They weren't, okay? And who knows where it started from? Probably started from God himself. So maybe Adam was the first man to create. Maybe God plays a Les Paul. Who knows? Maybe Adam plays a Strat. Anyway, I appreciate you guys staying in the ring. I hope it caught that audio there because that's kind of funny. But the next video, I'll go into fairly serious detail about the neck and how it relates to the body. All right. Thanks, guys.